Hi everyone in Algebra 2B. Today we're going to be going over your questions on 105B. So we're going to start on number 16. So for the first thing for number 16 is I'm going to solve this equation for y. And I'm going to start by moving this y to the other side and moving the 2 to the left-hand side. That would make y positive, and then 2 would become negative. Now you're going to take that and plug it into this equation here. So we have 5x minus 2 equals 6. You're going to distribute the x so that you get 5x squared minus 2x and then minus 6 equals 0. To solve, you're going to do quadratic formula. So x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So two negatives are going to make a positive, so that would be 2 over 10 plus or minus 2 squared is 4, but 4 times 6 times 5 is 120, so plus 4 would be the square root of 124 over 10. And the square root of 124, if we divide by 2, that would be 2 root 31. So I have 1 over 5 plus or minus 2 root 31 over 10. So my answer for x is going to be 1/5 plus or minus the square root of 31 over 5. Now I have to go through and solve for y. So y is going to be equal to 5 times this parentheses minus 2. So I replace the x with this and then minus 2. I'm going to distribute the 5. So I would get 1 plus or minus root 31 minus 2. So I can combine the 1 and the negative 2. And that would give me negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 31. Now moving on to number 17. I'm going to do the same thing for number 17. I'm actually going to solve the equation for y by moving the y to this side, moving the 2 to the other side. That makes y positive, and 2 is going to become negative. So now when I plug this in, I get x squared plus x minus 2 squared equals 8. I do need to multiply this x minus 2 out fully. So that would be x squared, sorry, that should be a plus sign, x squared minus 4x plus 4 minus 8 equals 0. Now simplify, this is going to become 2x squared minus 4x, and then minus 4 equals 0. Well, what I want to do is I actually want to simplify this equation. So you should notice that all of those parts are divisible by 2. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. And that would give me x squared minus 2x minus 2 equals 0. Now I'm going to do quadratic formula to solve for x. So I have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So two negatives are going to make a positive. So it would be 2 over 2. The square root here, I would have negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. So I have 4 plus 8, which is a square root of 12. And that could simplify to 2 square root 3 over 2, which means that your result for x is going to be 1 plus or minus the square root of 3. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to plug it in to solve for y. So I have 1 plus or minus the square root of 3 minus 2. I can combine the 1 and the negative 2, and that would give me negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 3. And that solves for x and y. Now moving on to number 18, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the top two equations and notice that if I were to add those together, the y's would cancel. So that's what I want to do, is I want to eliminate one of the variables. So adding those together, I'm going to get 3x minus 3z equals 11. Then I look at these bottom two equations. If I add those together, I also eliminate the y. So I want to do that, and that would give me 3x minus 2z equals 7. So now given these two equations, I'm just going to do elimination. I'm going to multiply the bottom equation by negative 1 so that I have 3x minus 3z equals 11 at the top. In the bottom, I would have negative 3x plus 2z equals negative 7, which means the x's are going to cancel, and you get negative z is equal to 4. So therefore, z is going to be equal to negative 4. Now I can easily solve for what x is equal to by taking this negative 4 and plugging it back in. So I'm going to plug it into the top equation. That would be 3x minus 3 times negative 4 equals 11. Negative 3 times negative 4 would be positive 12. So I would move that to the other side. And I would get minus 12. So 3x equals negative 1. So x is going to be equal to negative 1/3. And then to solve for y, you just have to plug that equation back in to the beginning. And I'm going to make sure that answer is correct, because usually we don't come up with fractions. So 105, number 18. That's not right. So must have done something wrong. So I probably did not write this equation down right. Let me go and check. See, even your teacher makes mistakes. So we have 2x minus y minus 2z equals 2. Oh, I see. 7 plus 2 is not 11, it's 9. So this should be 9. This should be then 2. So z is going to be equal to negative 2. So let's restart that. So z is equal to negative 2. And then I would have 3x minus 3 times negative 2 equals 11. Negative 3 times negative 2 is 6. So I would subtract 6. Again, this should be 9. So then this would be 3x equals 3. So then x is equal to 1. Sorry for the confusion there. Kind of messed myself up too. So now I'm going to go to the middle equation, which is going to be 1 plus y minus negative 2 equals 7. So 1 plus 2 is 3. So if I move the 3 to the other side, I'm going to subtract 3. And then I would get y is equal to 4. So I'm sorry for the confusion. I hope you were able to catch back up on that one. Now moving on to number 20. I need to solve this equation for y, so I'm going to move the x to the other side. Get negative 3y is greater than or equal to negative x plus 6. When you divide by negative 3, remember you have to flip the inequality because you're dividing by a negative. So that would be y is less than or equal to 1/3 x minus 2. Now it's an equal sign underneath, so it's going to be a solid line, and we're going to shade everything below because it says less than. Okay, so I'm going to start by graphing this. So negative 2 would be here. The slope would be rise 1 over 1, 2, 3. So your graph would be a solid line that looks something like this. The negative 3 on the x-axis is here. That's also going to be a solid line. Then we're going to shade. So we're going to shade everything for x is greater than. All the greater than values of x would be to the right. So that means it would be everything over here to the right. Then we're shading everything below our diagonal line, which would be everything below, meaning that your answer is going to be the section to the right of our vertical line and then underneath our diagonal line. Now looking at number 21. So these are the ones that we're going to factor, and these are from this lesson, I think. No, they're not from lesson 10. Anyways, so what we're going to do for this lesson is, oh, they are from this lesson. So I'm going to start by rearranging this so that they're in descending order. Notice that there's an x in every single term, so I'm actually going to factor that out as well as write this in descending order. So this would become 3x squared minus 5x minus 2 equals 0. So you have to notice if there's anything you can factor out of the equation first. Now you're going to multiply the first term times the last term. Step 1. So that would be 3 times negative 2 gives us negative 6. Now I need to find two numbers that multiply to give me negative 6 but add up to give me negative 5. Well, I already know it's not 3 and negative 2, but if I do negative 6 times positive 1, that would add up to negative 5. So these two are going to become your two middle terms. So for step number 3, instead of negative 5x, you're now going to have 3x squared minus 6x plus 1x minus 2 equals 0. Now you're going to separate these into two separate parentheses. These would be your first two. These are your second two. Oops, this is step 4. So I have x, and then I'm going to have 3x squared minus 6x for my first parenthesis, plus x minus 2 for the second parenthesis. So in both of these terms, the thing that you could factor out would be a 3. You could also factor out an x because both of those terms have an x. So this would be x, and then I would factor out 3x, leaving me with x and then minus 2. This one, there's nothing to factor out, so I assume that's a 1. And now we separate this. So there's going to actually end up being 3 parentheses. I'm going to have my x on the outside. Then I'm going to have my x minus 2 right here. And then I'm going to have what's left, which is the 3x plus 1. But you're not done. You're done factoring, but then you have to set it, you have to solve. So you're going to set each of these equal to 0. So I'm going to set x equal to 0. So that will be one of my answers. I'm going to set x minus 2 equal to 0. That's another one of my answers. And then I'm going to set 3x plus 1 equal to 0. So this one I'm going to move the 1 to the other side. So I get 3x equals negative 1. So my answer is going to be x is equal to 0. Then when I move this 2 to the other side, I get x is equal to 2. And then when I divide this by 3, I get x is equal to negative 1/3. And those will be your answers for number 21. So make sure after you factor, you set each of these equal to 0, and that's how you actually get your answer. Now moving on to number 22, the first thing that I'm going to do is write this in descending order. 6x squared minus 10x minus 4 equals 0. What you should be able to recognize is that you could factor out a whole number out of all three of these terms, and that whole number would be 2. So I'm actually going to just divide this whole thing. No, I'm going to factor out a 2. So this would become 2, and then 3x squared minus 5x minus 2 equals 0. Now I'm just going to take these terms, which if you compare, this is the same as what we just did right here. This is the same thing as we just did right here. So we actually don't have to do a whole lot of extra work because I know that my answer is going to look almost exactly like this, except instead of an x on the outside, it's going to have a 2. So it would be x minus 2 times 3x plus 1. Now I just need to set each of those equal to 0. But 2 does not equal 0, correct? So that's not one of my answers. But I have x minus 2 equals 0, and then again 3x plus 1 equals 0. I already know that 2 is not equal to 0, so this one is 0 is not going to be one of my answers, but I will have the 2 and the negative 1/3. So if you factored out that 2 at the beginning, you should have gotten the same answers as that you got for number 21. So 22 and 21 have very similar answers. Now moving on to number 23, what I'm going to do first is write this in descending order. So I have 3x squared plus 8x plus 4 equals 0. Step 1, multiply the first term times the last term. First term is going to be 3, last term is 12. Or last term is 4, so it's 12. Now I need to find the numbers that multiply to give me 12, but add up to give me 8. Well, I already know that 3 times 4 is 12, but 3 plus 4 is 7, so that's not going to work. But I do know that 6 times 2 equals 12, and that would add up to 8, which means that this 6 and 2 are going to replace my 8x. So that becomes 3x squared plus 6x plus 2x plus 4 equals 0. Now you're going to separate these into 2 separate parentheses. This will be your first, this will be your second. So 3x squared plus 6x plus 2x plus 4 equals 0. Now what divides both of those terms? Well, you know a 3 divides both of those terms and an x divides both those terms. When I factor that out, I would get x and then plus 2. For the second one, I would factor out a 2 and I would get x plus 2 as well. So now for step 5, I take out the common parenthesis, which is the x plus 2, and then make a parenthesis with what is left, which is the 3x plus 2. But you're asked to solve, so now I have to set this parenthesis equal to 0 and this parenthesis equal to 0. So x plus 2 equal to 0, and then 3x plus 2 equals 0. So when you move the 2 to the other side, it becomes negative 2. So you get 3x equals negative 2. This one too, you'd also move the x to the other side, or the 2 to the other side. So I would get x is equal to negative 2, and then negative 2/3. Now looking at number 24, same thing as the last problem. I'm going to look to see what I can divide all three of these terms by first. You notice that there's an x in every single term. Also that all three of those terms are divisible by 3. So I'm going to factor out a 3x and then write this in descending order. So if I divide this 9 by 3, I get 3 and x squared. If I divide this by 3 and an x, I would get 8x. And if I divide this by 3 and an x, I would get plus 4. Now we're going to go into my steps. So my first step is going to be to multiply the first times the last term. So 3. Well, okay. So again, if you're paying attention, this actually becomes pretty easy because 3x squared plus 8x is what we just factored up here. So the only thing that's different is that this one's going to have a 3x on the outside of the answer, which means that I would end up with 3x times x plus 2 times 3x plus 2 equals 0. So I just need to set each of these equal to 0. Well, I've already solved for the x plus 2 and the 3x plus 2. The only thing I need to solve for is when 3x is equal to 0. If I divide both sides by 3, 0 divided by 3 is still 0. So the only thing that's different about my answer between 23 and 24 is that in addition to these two, I'm going to have x is equal to 0. So you really need to pay attention on those problems because you may be doing more work than you actually have to, like I almost did. Now moving on to number 25. So for number 25, it's already in descending order. I'm going to start by multiplying my first term times the last term. So I have 2 times negative 5, which gives me negative 10. I need to find two numbers that multiply to give me negative 10, but add up to give me negative 3. So if you look at the 2 and the negative 5, 2 plus negative 5 is actually negative 3. So 2 times negative 5 actually adds up to negative 3. So now the 2 and the negative 5 are what's going to replace my negative 3. So in step 3, I would have the 2p squared plus 2p minus 5p minus 5 equals 0. You're going to separate this, your first parenthesis, this your second parenthesis. So 2p squared plus 2p plus negative 5p minus 5 equals 0. So notice that between these two terms, there's a 2 and a p that could come out. So that would leave me with there's p plus 1. In my second parenthesis, notice that there's a negative 5. That could come away, so that would leave me with p plus 1. So step 5 is to factor out that p plus 1. So I have p plus 1, and then in parentheses, I would have 2p minus 5. Now to solve, you're going to set this parenthesis equal to 0 and this parenthesis equal to 0. So I'd have p plus 1 equals 0, and then 2p minus 5 equals 0. So that would mean p is equal to negative 1. And then when you move the 5 to the other side, you get 2p is equal to 5. So I have two answers. I have p equals negative 1, and then p is equal to 5 over 2. Now moving on to number 26, the first thing that I'm going to do is recognize that all three of those terms can be divisible by 2. So that would give me 2 times 2x squared plus 9x plus 4 equals 0. Now I'm going to multiply the first term times the last term, so that would be 2 times 4 equals 8. Now I need to find the multiples of 8 that add up to 9. That should be easy because 8 times 1 equals 8, but that adds up to 9, which means the 8 and the 1 are going to replace the 9x. So for step 3, I would have the 2 on the outside, and then I have 2x squared, then I have plus 8x plus x plus 4 equals 0. We're going to put these in parentheses and then these in parentheses. So it would be 2x squared plus 8x, and then plus x plus 4. So the two things I can factor out of the first parentheses would be a 2 and an x. Should leave me with x plus 4. Nothing I can factor out the second term, so I just put plus 1. You should recognize that now there's an x plus 4 that can come out of both of those terms. So I'd have 2, and then I would have x plus 4, and then I have 2x plus 1. You're going to set each of these equal to 0. But notice that 2 does not equal 0, so 0 is not going to be one of your answers. Then you're going to have x plus 4 equals 0, and then 2x plus 1 equals 0. Move the 1 to the other side, so you get 2x equals negative 1. Move the 4 to the other side, so I'm going to have two answers. X is equal to negative 4, and x is equal to negative 1/2. Next, we're going to look at number 27. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute this 2 and bring everything up to the top. So I have x to the a, then I'm going to have a to the 2 plus 8, and then I have y to the b. When I bring this y to the top, it becomes negative b over 3. When I bring the x to the top, it becomes negative a over 6. Now I want to combine the x's, and then I want to combine the y's. The a is going to be by itself. This should be a to the a, not 2. I don't know where I got that. So now I have a to the a plus 8, and then x to the a minus a over 6, and then y to the b minus b over 3. Make a common denominator. So the a is going to be a to the a plus 8. X is going to be to the 5a over 6. And y would be to the 2b over 3. And unless I messed up again, which is very possible, I might have written this down wrong. Oh, shoot, this should have been x. My bad. So now I want to add this to that. So again, I'm sorry, but 6a plus 5a would actually be x to the 11a over 6 plus 8, and then y to the 2b over 3. I think I've now done that right, hopefully. And that would conclude number 27. I apologize for that. Now for number 28, we know that I cubed is equal to negative I, and I squared is equal to negative 1. So this would become 2 plus 3i in the numerator. In the denominator, I have negative 2. And then this would be negative 3i plus I would be negative 2i. So when I multiply top and bottom, I would multiply it by -2 plus 2i. I'm going to distribute that, so that's going to be -4 plus 4i minus 6i plus 6 times -1 over -2 times -2 is 4 minus 4i plus 4i. Then -2i times +2i would be -4 times -1. In the numerator, I have -4 minus 6 would be -10. And 4i minus 6i would be -2i. In the denominator, I have 4 plus 4, which is going to be 8. And I would divide all of that by 2, so that would be -5 minus I all over 4. And the last one we're going to do is number 30. So it says the area of the triangle is equal to the area of all of the circles. So the area of the triangle is always 1/2 base times height. And the circles are going to be pi r squared plus pi r squared plus pi 2 squared. I know that my base is 3 on this one, so that's going to be 3 over 2h equals 1 plus 1 plus 4. That's going to give us 6 pi. And to get the h by itself, you're going to multiply by 2 over 3. So that would give us h is equal to 4 pi. And that concludes your questions on lesson 105B. I hope you guys all have a great day. Please make sure you watch the lesson 106 video and post your questions for 106A by tomorrow morning. Hope you guys all have a great day. Bye.